Have you ever thought to yourself, what does it mean to be Muslim? What is the Islamic religion really all about? Did you know that the Islamic religion is the second largest religion in the world, with its members living across the globe, making up over the majority of over 50 countries? However, in the United States, Muslims only make up 1.1% of the population, causing Muslim Americans to be considered a marginalized population in the States. It is important to note that there are many interpretations within the Islamic religion, therefore causing a rich diversity of views and practices to be observed in the culture of this group. It would be impossible to say that every Muslim thinks the same or practices in one singular manner. Well, today in our presentation, we will go over the basic backgrounds of Islam, some values and beliefs and practices of the Muslim religion and culture, key characteristics of the members of this group, education and counseling related issues to the Muslim community, and possible strategies for working with members of this diverse group. The word Islam actually comes from the Arabic term meaning surrender. Muslims believe in the worship of one God whom they call Allah. The Islamic religion is over 1300 years old and began in 610 CC. Here's a quote to help us further understand parts of the Islamic religion. Islam teaches that there is no inherited sin. All children come into the world pure and innocent. It is our own actions and choices in life that can be sinful or virtuous. Salvation in Islam is achieved by following God's commandments. However, the assignment of heaven and hell is up to God alone and decided after the death of the person. The Holy Quran places a great importance on personal responsibility and continual self-improvement. Muslims follow what we call the sacred text of the Quran, written by the Prophet Muhammad, which has many similarities and differences to the Bible, as we can see. It is believed that the angel Gabriel came down and gave Muhammad the Quran, which was originally written in the Arabic language and contains 114 surahs, which are basically chapters in its text. Many of the Bible's disciples are mentioned in the Quran. An important fact to note is that Muslims are required to honor and respect the commandments in the previously revealed holy books, such as the scriptures of Abraham, the Torah of Moses, the Psalms of David, and the Gospels of Jesus Christ. Muslims are required to honor, respect, and believe in earlier prophets such as Noah, Abraham, Moses, Aaron, Solomon, David, and Jesus of Judeo-Christian faiths, as well as prophets of other such religions. This can be found in 12 Interesting Facts of Islam. Muslims do believe in Jesus, however, they do not believe he was the true prophet and do not believe in his resurrection. There are four major holidays to the Muslim practice. These are Ramadan, Layta Qata, Layta Akata, and Etafir. These are all observed according to the lunar-based Islamic calendar. Ramadan is a sacred time of daytime fasting for a month's time where Muslims choose to abstain from food, drink, and intercourse. Layta Qata, also known as Night of Power, is a tribute to when the first verses of the Quran were revealed to Muhammad. This commemoration takes place towards the end of Ramadan. The third celebration, the Eid al-Fitr, also known as the Festival of Fast Breaking, takes place at the very end of Ramadan. A prayer called the Eid is performed in a mosque or in an open outdoor area. It is important to note that the house of worship in the Islamic religion is called a mosque. The final celebration is the Hajj, which is known as a pilgrimage, when millions of Muslims travel once a year to the Mecca, the sacred house of Islam, which is located in Saudi Arabia. The Mecca was originally the place of worship and is where the Prophet Muhammad was born. It is also interesting to note that the Muslim religion is not just a religion, but a way of life and culture. Here is a brief look at the 5 pillars of Islam, which is the framework of worship and a sign of commitment to the Islamic faith. These correlate with some of the holidays we discussed earlier. Later on in our presentation, Shay will go into more depth of these 5 pillars. Shahada means faith, which is the most sacred statement in Islam and represents a profession of faith. Muslims repeat, there is no God but Allah, and his messenger is Muhammad, in Arabic 3 times. The second pillar, salut, means prayer. It is the practice of Muslims praying 5 times a day. Zakat, meaning charity, is similar to tithes in Christianity, where Muslims contribute 2.5% of their liquid assets and income. The fourth pillar, Shawm, is referred to fasting, which is represented in the holiday of Ramadan. There are exceptions made for those who are sick, elderly, pregnant, or small children, as the fasting is made up in the later in the year. The last pillar, Hajj, refers to the pilgrimage of over 2 million people traveling to the Mecca each year. Now let's review some interesting facts about the Muslim culture. As we discussed a lot, Muslims pray 5 times a day. They wash their face, ears, neck, hands, and feet before prayer. Have you ever come across someone in a public restroom washing their feet? Well, now you know, so don't be so quick to judge. Muslims refrain from the consumption of alcohol and they do not eat pork. Their animals must be slaughtered in a certain way by a Muslim with a prayer being said. In some subcultures of the Islamic religion, Muslims are taught that dogs are unclean, and if they touch one, they must wash their hands 6 times, once including with dirt. Something I learned years ago was that in the Muslim culture, the opposite sexes do not touch. They do not hug and they do not shake hands. A friend of mine converted to Islam and married a man from Egypt, which she now has 4 children with. The first time I met this man, I was very excited, and me being from the South, I ran up to him to give him a big hug. And that's when I learned this aspect of the Muslim culture. It's important to note that not all rituals and not all ideals are held exactly the same in the Islamic culture. Islam has a rich history and a diverse culture, as there are multiple differences in practices within Muslims living in all different areas and communities around the globe. There is actually a Muslim community called Hamtramck in Michigan, with half of its residents considered practicing the Islamic faith. It is said that it has become the first in the U.S. to have a Muslim American government. Here's a quote: as with all other religions, it is important to note that there are subcategories of Islam. Islam is represented by several major branches. Here are some misconceptions of the Muslim community. After experiencing 9/11, mass media really painted a picture that the Muslim religion were full of terrorists. However, just like the KKK and Christianity, there are extremists in every religion. The extremists in this community caused havoc that day, causing many Americans to lose their life. However, many fellow Muslim Americans felt the same way and felt the pain and were very angry too. The way the media attacked the Muslim community caused a great prejudice to flood our states. Muslims began to suffer even more oppression and brutality at the hands of misinformed Americans. Another often unknown facts about Muslims is that not all Arabs are Muslims and not all Muslims are Arab. The Muslim community is comprised of many subgroups with members living all across the globe. Also, you do not have to be born into this religion and culture, as many members choose to convert to Islam. The last fact I'll give you is the controversy of the wearing of the hijab. Many female Muslims choose to wear the hijab. In our feminist society, many prejudge this as Muslim women being oppressed. However, for most Muslim women, it is a decision that these women make based on their religious beliefs and the guidance of their Quran. Going back to the discrimination we talked earlier, My same friend had problems in America wearing her hijab as she was judged for her attire. This misinformation in our society about Muslims has created a dangerous place for Muslims to live in America. It is time that we consider this and work to make societal changes against these prejudices. It is said that Islam has over 2 billion followers, and like we said earlier, it is the second largest religion globally, projected to outnumber Christians by 2050. With the rising numbers of members of Muslim Americans in our society, it is important to understand these key characteristics and learn education related issues in the Muslim community. Ms. Shea will go over these in our next slides.
Islam is a religion that Muslims pay a lot of attention to. Um, Religious scriptures, including Quran, Hadith, and Sunnah, influences significantly the beliefs and practices that um, many Muslims um, participate in and believe in. Beliefs is one of them, along with five principles of Islam: Shahada, belief; Salat, which is prayers; Zakat, which is alms; and Sawm, which is fasting; and Hajj, which is pilgrimage. And it defines the nature of worship and behavior. Some aspects of social nature of worship and behavior is some of these. Um, Also, some of the aspects of social and personal conduct related to Islamic religion include promotion of community togetherness, dress code, and honor. In Islam, the norms are about prayers, food factors, and dress codes. Islam emphasizes scripture based guidance for life. Um, as I mentioned before, the five pillars of Islam structures worship, and it is surrounded by prayer, food, and dress code that are their most important aspects of their religion. And they're also big on respect for values, supports effective counseling. In my next slide, I'm going to talk about the education related issues in the Muslim community. This slide discusses education related issues in the Muslim community. Um, of course, educational factors do vary by cultural factors. Experiences in Muslims' education have differences because of cultural factors and social economic environment factors. Some learned Muslims pay close attention to religious learning and practically in Quranic schools teaching Arabic language, and this clashes with secular learning systems. Moral, firmly rooted, and approved educational goals and gender roles may be predominant among traditional Muslims and their families. And they also report to limited participation in some core curricular and interacting experiences because of religious and cultural principles of modesty. Besides factors like xenophobia, that is Islamophobia within learning institutions can influence students' learning and performances. These characteristics needs to be managed within cultural sensitive framework that will promote the freedom of religious practice while learning. And as I've stated before, moral values influences educational choices for Muslims. And then also some do avoid mixed gender activities and events. And it is also, like I said, culturally sensitive methods do encourage inclusivity. In my next slide, we're going to talk about counseling issues within the Muslim community. Counseling issues within the Muslim community. Counseling requires cultural sensitivity for Muslims. Counseling any religion specific people, especially Muslims, might be an issue that needs extra focus on specific religious and cultural differences. While the importance of confidentiality could apply to any patient or client, there are some aspects peculiar to Muslims. They may not seek a counselor because of a stigma or because of the idea of seeking professional help seems un-Islamic. Now, it is expected that gender roles in Islam influences these expectations, and other issues such as psychological and mental health may be addressed differently. They may be talked about more openly in family or religious contexts. Mental health stigma, the culture of modesty and possible mistrust of secular approaches to counseling can become an obstacle to communication. And also, clients may be unwilling to discuss personal issues, especially with those from the outside world. It is possible to note that recognizing such problems make the counseling environment more accepting and nonviolent. Like other religions, there are barriers to education and counseling for Muslims as well. Muslims frequently experience a range of challenges in their learning or counseling context due to cultural differences or prejudice. Multilingual issues, although not new to the province, might pose a problem of interpretation, especially recent arrivals, while cultures such as gender sensitivity and modesty is in some some cultures may hinder the use of the services. Discrimination can also manifest culturally and cause cultural incompetence, and if so, such conditions would deter clients from engaging in seeking assistance. There are some mundane factors, including having few Muslim counselors available or having access to culturally appropriate educational material. As I stated previously, language and cultural issues limit participation, as well as discrimination. It impacts educational opportunities, and it also deters Muslims from seeking educational experiences or therapy. And unlike some other religions, for Muslims, their religion observances conflict with schedules that we would normally partake in. They are very firm with their religion, unlike some of ours. However, addressing these barriers must be identified to approach clients and offer them fair and culturally sensitive programs. Despite the barriers that are placed upon Muslim students, there are strategies for supporting them and clients. The pursuit of improvement in the education and counseling process of Muslim individuals requires assertiveness and cultural competency. This way, educators should try being more flexible with the class schedules, allowing the students to pray when needed and providing private areas. I know that in public schools, that would be a barrier just because everything is like a time schedule and so strict. Students really don't get a chance to practice their religion in schools, and some schools it's not allowed, so that would definitely be a barrier for Muslim students. When counseling, understanding the centrality of faith may be helpful. Inviting faith-related materials or following Islamic counseling models may help establish rapport with the client. There is a rationale for specific gender practices like gender matching of counselors, respecting the participation of the family, and religious teachings in the treatment. It is advisable to make educators and counselors aware of the cultural aspects of Islamic religion, which would help them accommodate clients and students. Last but not least, here are resources, utilization in education and counseling. Engaging and applying research and religious tools are helpful while addressing Muslim learners or consumers. Books and counseling organizations that are Islamic and other scholars in psychology also give ways to guidelines on top of integrating religious and psychological approaches. Using material from organizations fighting against Islamophobia and from Muslim organizations rights, teachers can receive guidance on how to create a welcoming environment in schools for Muslim students. Support structures within the Islamic culture also involve utilizing local mosques or community based structures to help understand and address the needs of Muslim people. These resources assist in addressing theoretical and practical applications of culturally sensitive education or counseling that supports this area of endeavor. And here are some of my main resources for education and counseling in Muslims. Mosque and community centers offers support, anti-Islamophobia, materials promote inclusivity, faith-based counseling approaches faster rapport, and Islamic resources aids educational understanding, and these tools enhances effective delivery.
Next, we'll be covering strategies for counseling Muslims. So first, it's important to understand cultural sensitivity. As we start to shift towards multicultural counseling, Muslims start to become a focus of ethical counseling methods. It is important to note that Muslims do not have one single set of beliefs. This is due to them having very small groups/communities spread out throughout the U.S. and throughout the world. And it's important to note, in order to effectively work with Muslims, counselors must understand the client and the uniqueness of their environment. Next, we'll cover effects of stress, an Islamic view on mental health. According to research, since 9/11, Muslims have reported more stress and anxiety due to being stereotyped for their faith. It's even noted that some Muslims were physically attacked after post 9/11 out of fear. As far as mental health is concerned, Muslims believe that any problems that they are dealing with can be solved by reading the Quran, which is the holy book of Muslim faith that is sent from God. This can cause Muslims trouble at times because the answers that they're trying to seek may not be found in the Quran. Conditions such as depression and anxiety aren't necessarily found in the Quran and may not seem deemed as problems. Next, examining cultural identity, religious commitment, and worldview. So, during the beginning stages of counseling Muslims, it is important to examine the client's cultural identity, religious commitment, and worldview. By doing this, the counselor is now putting the client in the best position to get the treatment needed. This can lead to easier diagnosis, easier procedures, and better goals for the client overall. But first of all, it's important to gain a sense of trust once meeting with the client, because a form of trust must be established first. Next, we'll go on to gender roles and cross-gender therapy. So when it comes to gender roles, Western culture and Islamic/Muslim cultures differ a lot. In Western cultures, genders are equal with no set of expectations. Both men and women are encouraged to express how they feel, and dynamics of the family are more flexible. For example, there are households in Western cultures where the mom works and the dad stays home with the kids. Cross-gender therapy in Western cultures is also very common. There is no problem unless, for instance, the client may feel comfortable with someone the same sex as them. Now, as far as Muslim cultures are concerned, interaction between men and women outside of the family is not allowed. Also, women in Muslim cultures are seen as the caregiver, which, knowing this, can make cross-gender therapy in Muslim clients very problematic. So next we're going to talk about establishing trust. Establishing trust is one of the key things when counseling Muslims. So first, we're going to cover Muslims from collectivist cultures. Most of them do not view feelings or behaviors as abnormal. So instead, they blame all of their emotional focuses on physical symptoms. Furthermore, family honor plays a huge role in Muslim cultures. Plenty of Muslims will not share anything from their own personal life, their problems, or their feelings, solely to not bring shame to their own family. This just shows how much Muslim cultures put the family unit before the person. And lastly, when working with Muslims, it is important to use accurate empathy. So accurate empathy is a great way to establish trust, and according to Lesley University, accurate empathy involves knowing what is one thinking and feeling and how they're feeling. Next, we'll talk about mental health care for Muslims living in the United States. So research shows that only 9 to 11% of Muslims have sought out counseling services compared to the other 20% of religions seeking therapy. A lot of this is to do with Islamophobia, which is the discrimination of Muslims for their religion, and high mental health stigma in Muslims, causing less access to mental health care. This is known as double stigma. So double stigma happens when racial minorities with mental health issues are less likely to get the care and have worse physical outcomes due to being stigmatized by both societies. So in this case, Muslims are being double stigmatized to the stereotype that people already have on them and by their own community for trying to seek out mental health. So next we'll go on to preferences and obstacles in pursuing mental health support. So like previously said, Islamophobia, individuals facing Islamophobia might not want to open up to a counselor who is not Muslim or a white counselor. Studies actually show that Muslims favor both individual and community-based therapy. And they also show that Muslims living in the United States want a counselor who has a good education, relevant training, and extensive experience. On top of that, they want a therapist who is empathetic and has patience. Now, when also working with these clients, it's important that counselors should know cost, travel, and insurance play a huge role in selecting a counselor too. So as far as strategies are concerned, one strategy is to have better quality in working with Muslims. Counselors can work with the imam, which is their prayer leader, to bring awareness to the community-based therapy. So since Muslims some prefer community and individual-based, counselors can work with the imam and express them to become an advocate for community-based therapy while encouraging him to encourage those individuals who want to seek help outside of the community to get their help as well.
Here are my list of references used to gather my information about Islamic culture and religion.
And these are our references.
Good job.